Welcome back to the deep dive. You know we love to get into the nitty-gritty of history, right? Today we're going beyond those big Mongol conquest stories. Yeah, the battles, the hordes. We're looking at something a little different, Mongol vassalage.
Vassalage.
Yeah. It might surprise you that these fierce warriors were also pretty darn good diplomats, especially when they were expanding their empire,
Yeah.
southern Iran specifically. And to really untangle this web of relationships, right, between the Mongols and their vassals, we've got an amazing source that dives deep into Mongol rule in Iran using all kinds of stuff, chronicles, financial records, even personal accounts. So get ready for shifting loyalties,
Hmm.
power struggles, and maybe even some surprising cultural exchanges along the way.
Well, what's so fascinating about the Mongols is they were incredibly pragmatic. They adapted their strategies to whatever situation they found themselves in.
Right.
And southern Iran, oh, that posed a unique challenge. Think about those vast open steppes, perfect for the Mongol cavalry, right, thundering across. But southern Iran, it's rugged mountains, scorching deserts, not exactly ideal for their classic tactics.
So instead of just like full-on invasion mode, they went a different route,
They did.
turning those local dynasties into vassals.
Exactly.
So basically incorporating those existing power structures into their empire.
Right. And you know what? This strategy actually led some local rulers to welcome the Mongols.
Really?
Oh, yeah. For some, the Mongols were like liberators,
Yeah.
a chance to break free from oppressive overlords.
I mean, I guess I can see that.
Take the Seljuks of Fars, for example. They were under the rule of the Khwarezmian Shah, and they were not happy about it. When the Mongols showed up, the Seljuks saw their chance. They saw a way to shake off that yoke and even join forces with the Mongols against their old rulers.
Wow, talk about a power shift.
It was.
Okay, so becoming a Mongol vassal, it wasn't just like, hey, you're in charge now, right?
No.
There were like specific terms of surrender.
Oh, absolutely.
And these weren't just vague promises.
Think of it more like a detailed contract,
Yeah.
very meticulously crafted to ensure the vassal was fully integrated into that Mongol imperial system.
They didn't mess around.
Not at all. So imagine, right? Mongol officials arrive in your city. They meticulously count every single thing, every person, every sheep, every grapevine they wanted to know.
It wasn't just about knowing your resources, though, was
No,
it?
it was about asserting control, making it very clear who was in charge. And then, of course, came the taxes and the tribute,
Oh, right.
often paid in gold, silver, textiles, sometimes even military service.
That's a lot.
It was. But there's one more thing we can't forget about when we're talking about Mongol vassalage,
What's that?
the hostage system.
Right, the hostages. Now, when you hear hostage, you probably think prisoner, right?
You do.
But it was so much more nuanced than that. It wasn't just about keeping those potential rebels in check.
It was strategic. It
Yeah.
was about fostering cultural exchange.
Yeah.
Solidifying their influence in a much more subtle way.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Imagine, right? You're a young prince sent to the Mongol court as a hostage. You're immersed in their culture, learning the language, the customs, even forming bonds with the Mongol elite. When you go back home, you're bringing back a whole different perspective. You might even influence your own culture with what you learned.
So it's kind of like a cultural exchange program, but with way higher stakes.
Oh, way higher.
Yeah.
And this exchange,
Mhm.
it wasn't limited to just those royal hostages. The Mongols, they were pretty open to incorporating talented individuals from different backgrounds into their administration.
That's interesting.
Oh yeah, this openness to talent. It didn't matter what your background was.
Yeah.
That was a key part of their pragmatic approach to building their empire. And let's not forget, there was always this constant shifting landscape of alliances and rivalries.
Oh, yeah.
The vassals, they often played different Mongol factions against each other.
Trying to get the upper hand.
Exactly, for their own benefit. It
Right.
created this incredibly complex web of intrigue.
It sounds like a real-life Game of Thrones, but Persian edition.
That's a great way to put it. One minute you're allied with this Mongol faction, the next you're switching sides to try and gain some advantage.
It must have been wild.
It was.
Yeah.
And all this political maneuvering, it had a huge impact on the social and political landscape of southern Iran. You see the rise of new elites, religious scholars, merchants, even individuals from marginalized communities. They saw opportunities under Mongol rule.
And they took them.
They did. And of course, you had those traditional dynasties, like the Selgrids, who suddenly found themselves struggling to maintain their power and influence in this new world order.
It's not just a simple story of the Mongols conquering and imposing their will, is it?
No, it's much more fluid, much more dynamic. You see local actors adapting, resisting, even thriving in the face of Mongol domination. But you know what? To understand the broader impact on southern Iran, whether Mongol rule left a lasting legacy or was just a blip, we need to go deeper. We need to move beyond those simple narratives of conquerors and conquered and delve into the intricate ways these two cultures interacted and influenced each other. And that's where our deep dive gets really interesting.
Okay, I am ready to delve. Okay, so we've been talking about how the Mongols, they really used that vassalage system to their advantage to expand their empire. But empires don't last forever, right? Things change.
They do.
The Mongol Empire, it started to fragment. It broke apart into these smaller khanates. So I'm curious, how did that shift from like one big unified empire to these independent khanates? How did that impact those relationships, with the vassals in southern Iran, those agreements they'd made?
It shook things up.
Mm.
Big time. Imagine, right, you're a local ruler, you made a deal with the Mongols, you're paying your taxes, you sent your kid off as a hostage, and then boom, new Mongol rulers all over the place.
Mm.
And they all want power. They all want resources.
Yeah, it
Sure.
sounds like those terms of surrender we talked about, those carefully crafted agreements. Maybe they didn't hold up so well when everything got so fractured.
You got it. The basic idea of vassalage, that stayed. But these new khanates, like the Ilkhanate in Persia, they needed money. They were desperate to be financially stable. And that often meant putting the squeeze on their vassals.
More taxes.
More tribute, even more than before.
So on top of like trying to navigate all those relationships with the different Mongol factions, now these local rulers they're getting hit with even heavier financial burdens. I can't imagine that went over well.
Oh, it didn't. That's when you start to see rebellions popping up.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The Ilkhanate, under rulers like Abaka and Argun, they faced all kinds of rebellions. Some from ambitious local rulers who, they wanted to break free from Mongol control. Some even from within the Mongol ranks themselves.
Wow. So it's shifting from these big conquest stories to a period of like internal power struggles and political intrigue. Did any of those vassal states actually, manage to do well in this environment, or were they all just crushed under the weight of Mongol demands and all the infighting?
Some adapted. Some even prospered, at least for a while. The Kuatlukanids of Kirman, they're a great example.
Hmm.
Their ruler, Quapalden, he'd actually been sent to the Mongol court as a hostage when he was young.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now you might think, oh, that's terrible, but he used it to his advantage.
Really?
He really did. He built relationships with those Mongol elites, learned their customs, gained their trust.
So it's like something that could have been seen as a negative, a weakness, he turned it into a strength.
Exactly. And that deep understanding of Mongol politics, it allowed him to be really savvy within the Ilkhanate. He secured favors, arranged marriages between his kids and Mongol royalty. He even used his influence to protect his own dynasty.
So playing the long game really paid off, but I can't imagine it was easy. It must have been like constantly walking a tightrope, trying to balance his own goals with what the Mongols wanted from him.
Oh, absolutely. It was a delicate balancing act, and not everyone could pull it off. Even the shrewdest rulers couldn't guarantee their survival in the Ilkhanate.
So some vassals, like the Kuatlukanids, they managed to adapt, even thrive for a time. But a lot of others, it sounds like they had a much rougher go of it. What ultimately led to the decline of those vassal states? Was it just the economic pressure, or was there more to it?
It's a mix of things. Economic exploitation. Oh, that was huge. The Ilkhanate always needed money, right, to fund their wars, to maintain their lifestyles, and that put a huge strain on their vassals. But then you also have internal conflicts within the vassal states, succession disputes, rivalries between different families, ambitious nobles, all trying to grab power for themselves.
So it's like this perfect storm. Internal pressures, external pressures, all just pushing down on these vassal states. And let's not forget, even when the Mongols weren't actively conquering, they were still, this powerful force, this threat lurking in the background.
Like a volcano. You never know when it's going to erupt.
Exactly. So if the Mongols were all about centralization, all about control, why didn't they just, rule these areas directly? Why bother with this whole complex system of vassalage?
Well, the Mongols, they weren't just warriors. They were also pragmatists. And they knew that governing this vast empire, it required flexibility. They didn't have the manpower to directly manage everything, especially in places with tough terrain or strong local traditions.
So it was strategic. They understood that sometimes it's better to delegate, to work with local elites, to use those existing power
It was
structure.
all about balance, maintaining their authority while relying on others to handle the day-to-day stuff. It's a strategy that a lot of empires have used throughout history, but as we've seen, even the most carefully designed systems, they can fall apart when you've got internal power struggles, economic pressures, and just the inherent challenges of managing all these different people with their own goals and ambitions.
It sounds like the Mongol success, it wasn't just about military might. It was about their ability to adapt, to delegate, to work within existing systems, even if it meant, making compromises, dealing with all that shifting and changing of alliances. But as the Ilkhanate itself went into decline, all those networks of vassalage, they started to crumble too.
They did. The decline of the Salgurids in Fars, that's a prime example. Internal divisions, plus that constant pressure from the Mongols, it all led to their downfall.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about losing political power. It had a real impact on southern Iran, socially, economically.
So as these powerful dynasties crumbled, it's creating this vacuum.
Other groups are ready to step into that void.
It's a reminder that even when empires are declining, there are still winners and losers. As the old order falls apart, there are new opportunities for those who are adaptable, who know how to seize the moment. But what about those broader trends, the cultural trends, the economic trends? Did the decline of the vassal states lead to just complete collapse in southern Iran?
Not a complete collapse. You got to remember, Persian culture, it's tough, it's resilient. Even with the Mongols, ruling over them, art, architecture, literature, it all kept going. Sometimes even with the support of those new elites who'd figured out how to make things work under Mongol rule. The economic side of things, well, that's a little trickier. Some areas, yeah, they saw a decline. Taxes went down, economic activity slowed, probably because of those Mongol demands,
Yeah.
and disruptions to trade. The other areas, they adapted. They even did well.
So it's kind of a mixed bag. Some places did okay, others not so much. But I'm curious about the Mongols themselves. How did they view their Persian subjects? Was it just pure domination, exploitation?
Yep.
Or was there something more to it?
Good question. And it's one that historians are still, trying to figure out. Remember, of the Mongols, yeah, they had a reputation for being ruthless, but they weren't all the same. There's actually evidence of cultural exchange, religious tolerance, even intermarriage between Mongols and Persians. The Mongol rulers, they often relied on Persian advisors, administrators, because they knew how to run those complicated bureaucratic systems.
So they needed their expertise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we can't ignore the fact that the Mongols were in charge, right?
Yeah.
And they often used some pretty brutal methods to stay in control.
So it's like we've been saying all along. It's complicated. It's contradictory. You see cooperation. You see coercion. History's rarely black and white, is it?
You got it. And it's that complexity that makes studying the Mongol Empire so fascinating. It challenges those simple stories, barbarian conquerors versus civilized societies. It's so much more than that. It's cultural influences, political maneuvering, economic forces. It all comes together to shape what happens, both to the conquerors and the conquered.
It's a reminder that even the most powerful empires, they're still influenced by the people and the cultures they come into contact with. We've seen how the Mongols, yeah, they were amazing warriors, but they were also really good at adapting, at being pragmatic. And they used that vassalage system to build their empire, to hold on to it. We talked about those terms of surrender, all the shifting loyalties, the long-term impact of Mongol rule in southern Iran, politically, socially, economically. But as the Ilkhanate started to weaken, all those relationships, all those carefully balanced agreements, they started to fall apart. And those once powerful vassal dynasties, they crumbled.
And we've also seen how the decline of those dynasties didn't always mean that, local power just disappeared. Sometimes it created opportunities for new groups to rise up, especially those who knew how to work within the Mongol system.
It's not just the Mongols dictating everything, right? There's pushback. There are local groups trying to gain power, to influence things within that new world order.
Exactly. The Sayyids in Shiraz, that's a perfect example. They were descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. So they had this religious authority that gave them, a certain amount of influence even under Mongol rule. And as the Selgrids got weaker, the Sayyids, they really used that to their advantage. They got appointed to important positions. They even challenged the
So
Selgrids.
they used their religious status to gain political and economic power. It's fascinating. Even under an empire, people still find ways to make their own moves.
They do. And another group that gained prominence during this time, they were the bureaucrats, the guys who knew how to handle finances, administration. The Mongols, they might have been great warriors, but they weren't so good at running those systems. So they really depended on local experts. And a lot of those experts, they had actually served under the previous Persian dynasties.
So they already had the experience.
Exactly. And these bureaucrats, a lot of them came from merchant families or families with a tradition of scholarship. They became this essential link between the Mongols and the people they ruled.
So both sides needed each other in a way. The Mongols needed their expertise. The bureaucrats saw a chance to get ahead, to become more influential. I'm I'm guessing it wasn't always, smooth sailing.
You're right. There was definitely friction. The Mongols, they were used to a more centralized system, more authoritarian. And that sometimes clashed with the way the Persians did things. And then, of course, there was corruption. Both Mongol officials and local elites, they were looking out for themselves.
So navigating all those relationships, it must have been tricky. Were there any outright rebellions, any organized resistance to the Mongols because of all this?
There were definitely times when people pushed back. They resisted specific policies or officials.
Mm.
But there wasn't like this big coordinated movement to overthrow the Mongols in southern Iran. You got to remember, the Mongols, they were still a powerful military force,
Uh-huh.
and people knew that they could be brutal.
So it was more about finding those subtle ways to resist, working within the system, adapting.
Exactly. It shows how resilient Persian culture was
Yeah.
and how good people were at navigating those power dynamics.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into Mongol vassalage in southern Iran. We've uncovered a lot. Those terms of surrender, the ever-changing loyalties, the impact of Mongol rule on the region. It's been a fascinating journey. And it reminds us that history is never just a simple story of winners and losers.
It's full of twists and turns. It's full of contradictions. And those are the stories that really grab you, that make you think. We hope you'll keep exploring this period.
Yeah.
Look at those primary sources. Question the usual narratives.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.